Welcome to McAfee Conversations with Bilal Hafiz. McAfee helps educate investors and provide investment insights for all markets from crypto to equities to bonds. For our latest views, visit McAfee.com. So greetings and welcome, Dave. It's fantastic to have you on the podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation for a while now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was good to meet you in person a couple months ago, and thank you for having me on the show. And love your logos as well, McAfee. I dig it. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I love your background as well. And NightDragon, I have to ask, what's the why NightDragon? What is a NightDragon, and what's the significance of that? That's the name for listeners. That's the name of Dave's company, and he's the founder and managing director of.
We have to have cool logos, I guess, and cool names, I suppose, if you're in the world of cybersecurity and security tech. But NightDragon comes from a pretty famous and seminal moment in cybersecurity history. I'm sure you don't know all the history of cyber, but for the listeners out there, in 2008 time window, we had a series of breaches of United States infrastructure by the Chinese. And it was really those seminal moments where, for the first time, you watched a very large government essentially steal from companies, as opposed to government on government. It was government on commercial, and it was very widespread. It's called Advanced Persistent Threats, or APTs. And the first one was called Aurora, which was a seminal moment. Google source code stolen, kind of a whole thing pulling out of China. Lots of things happened. The second one was called NightDragon, and the third one was called Shady Rat. So Shady Rat didn't sound so good. So it was either NightDragon or Aurora as a seminal moment in cyber. I love the dragons, so there you go. And I was born in the year of the dragon, so there was a serendipity of that. So
great. That's a great story. Now, before we go into our conversation, I do like to ask my guests something about their origin stories. So why don't you tell me something about, what you studied at college? Was it inevitable you'd end up in, the cyber world and later investing? What's your story?
Yeah, grew up in Pennsylvania, United States, Pennsylvania, coal regions of Pennsylvania, and blue collar kind of parents, and did everything in their power to kind of get you to the next level. Like yourself and everybody else, we learned from our folks. My brother and I were the first to ever go to college, and I grew up in sports as well, wrestling and martial arts. I ended up getting a lot of scholarship opportunities as well. So at least it reduced the burden for my parents, and ended up going to the University of Delaware, which probably not a lot of people heard of. It's the Fighting Blue Hens as the mascot. Got to have a tough mascot there, the Blue Hen. But the net of it was I wrestled through college, was an All-American wrestler, studied computer science and electrical engineering, and, just fell in love with technology at a time when, it was just beginning to really take off. And then I drove my car across the country with no job, no money. And what I did learn in my university days was that the land of opportunity was Silicon Valley, California. And drove my car across the country and came to Silicon Valley and started to make my way in there and feel like an immigrant in a lot of ways, like many people do. And I immigrated across the country. It seemed so far in California at that time. And, but what a land of opportunity it was. If you work hard, you're humble, you're honest, you're hungry. It just is so I feel very fortunate to have grown up in the era of Silicon Valley in a way. And I couldn't code though. So I ended up not being a very good coder. So I was better CEO than I was coder in the end of the day.
Okay, well that's not bad. Being a better CEO than a coder, and
Right.
now you founded NightDragon. So tell me a bit more about NightDragon. What's its focus and what
Yeah.
it do?
So the quick 2-minute background is that I was a multi-time CEO. I ran some pretty large companies. One of my first companies was Oracle Corporation. I rose up inside Oracle, and then I went and joined a company that did database security. It was called Quest Software, and I helped lead that company to a very large exit, an IPO and an exit. Then became CEO of Documentum, which did document management, but secure document management sold that to EMC for 1.9 billion, and then ended up joining McAfee, where I became CEO there, grew that company, became, sold it to Intel for almost 8 billion in cash, then became CEO of FireEye and helped take that company from about 10 million of revenue to a billion of revenue and $16 billion market valuations. And all along the way there as an operator, I learned a lot about the security world and I fell in love with it almost since I was in university days. I just thought the risk and the threats that were occurring because of computing and technology was a real threat, an existential threat to mankind. And I ended up pretty much dedicating my whole career and my whole existence to it. So to answer your question on NightDragon, I really wanted to change way I saw venture capital kind of working. And having had many venture capitalists on my board for many years, I was always appreciative of the capital, but I didn't really see a lot of value creation that these venture capitalists would bring to me or to my companies. And I really wanted to change that with NightDragon. So my company is an operating platform married together with an investment platform. We think of ourselves as strategic operating investors. The strategic part is focused on security tech, which is really now a 500 billion a year market, growing to a trillion, 4 times faster than IT. And with all the things happening in the world, this is a problem. So if we're able to really invest, operate, and focus on a big sector, almost like a fintech, biotech, now security tech, we could build something special. And so for the last decade, I've been working on NightDragon from an investment point of view, the last 6 years, building an operating platform on top of it. Proud to say we have 125 employees and advisors now tied into NightDragon. So we're making progress, but we're on the 2.0 version now, maybe. So
That's
got many more
fantastic.
versions to go.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, in terms of when we had a conversation, you told me about your security clearance, with the US security establishment and also even the UK security establishment. Can you tell me a bit more about what that means?
Yeah, it's important because when I was CEO of McAfee and then also FireEye, I was partner to the government in a big way. And I say the government, I use global government as the government, even though I'm American. I partnered pretty extensively with the U.S. government during that time frame. Going back to NightDragon and the naming, during that time period, President Barack Obama appointed me onto the National Security Council, what's called the Telecommunications Subcouncil. But I ended up serving 4 administrations with the White House now, 3 different presidents, 4 different administrations. And I work really with the White House and then other intelligence agencies on the threats and the risks that are occurring. As part of that, you get a clearance, you get a top secret clearance. You basically work with the government. So I have the highest ranking civilian clearance you can have. Frankly, it's the highest ranking government clearance you can have too. And I work with the administrations on various problems, act as a bit of a proxy to the United States and its Five Eye partners. That includes Great Britain, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, et cetera, but also the NATO markets. And as a part of that, it's a great honor. It gives me opportunity to learn what threats and risks are happening in the world, but also how to partner with the government so that we can shape regulation, we can sell product to the government more effectively and do things. And recently I was named as Vice Chairman of Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security in the United States as well. So a number of different roles from the NSA to the CIA to Homeland Security to the White House over my years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I'd love to see your emails, which I'm sure I'm not allowed to. Um, I was going to ask, just in terms of how to think about how threats have changed. You mentioned that Night Dragon, Aurora, and what was the other? The rat threat,
Shady rat.
Shady Rat. So that was a government to company attack. That was back then. That was 10, 15 years ago. So what were the types of attacks that were seen around back then, whether it was government to government, company to company, and how's it changed versus today? Like what's been the sort of the part, what's the evolution of threats?
It's a really good question and a really important one. When I first began at McAfee and really had a kind of a front row seat to the threats and risks that are occurring, most of you know McAfee at the time were pronounced from a European point of view, McAfee. But we largely focused on worms, Trojans, viruses, things that were kind of scary a little bit just by nature of a virus or a Trojan. But at the time, it was more of a nuisance kind of thing. It would spread a virus around. I remember one of the big viruses at the time was the I love you virus. And
I
the I
remember
love
that.
you virus was, wow, it pops up on your screen unannounced and it says, I love you. Like, wow, that's really scary. But what was scary about it was how it could spread to millions and millions of computers. Soon after that, there was one called Code Red that was a little more dangerous. And over time, you watched the threats and risks scale up, the dangers from what we call kind of hacktivism or activism, all the way up to crime, then up to espionage, then even now into terrorism and warfare. So the dangers have all risen as the technology has gotten more sophisticated. The actors have gotten much more capable. And now, when you put together motivation with capability, bad things really happen. So think about what's going on with China, on the United States, with Russia, with Iran, with North Korea. We have over 100 countries in the world that have offensive cyber commands where they don't even hide the fact that they're hacking their neighbors or hacking their citizens. And basically, it creates a perfect storm problem because you end up with a scenario where the governments are actually the culprits too, and the defendants. So it's very hard for them. They don't want to give up their ability to, use surveillance and capabilities to protect the world in some cases, or be aggressive in the world in other cases. And therefore, you have no real regulation. There's just nothing happening in the world from a governance of cyber's domain, and it creates the wild, wild west. And that just creates more and more threat actors, more and more crime, more and more espionage, more and more terrorism. And now we see one of the biggest problems in the world from a threat point of view being what we call cognitive warfare. And if coming out of the World Economic Forum, they agreed with a lot of what I've been saying for a while. The biggest existential threat we have is misinformation, disinformation, particularly brought on by generative AI now. So my ability to create a replica of you or me with my voice and my appearance, and then have me say things that are true, now can create a profound effect on society. And we really have no defense for it. And last thing I'll say on that is we have 64 democracies up for election in the next 12 months. That's affecting 4 billion people. And when you look at what the offense can do, governments can do, crime groups can do, proxies of governments can do, you now have a pretty scary problem where you don't know what to believe. You have no idea what's true and false. You don't know where to go to get the information that's true or false. There's no regulation of truisms and reporting anymore. And we have a problem we don't know how to stop and create more virality. So that threat of the I love you virus to where we're at today, wow, what a difference we're in, and what a particularly scary time we're living in this century now.
It sounds, I mean, rather quite frightening, the whole thing. I mean, so I mean, I mean, you're involved in this whole space. So if you're a country like the US, or some of the Western countries like the UK, I mean, what steps can the government take? Because I imagine if it's a government to government attack, I mean, the US is a huge country, the infrastructure is all over the place, and it's not like a centralized body. I mean, so they presumably another country like China or Russia could find the weakest point in the electrical grid or something, or somewhere. I mean, how do you go about thinking about this? It just sounds so difficult in terms of internal organization, and then the whole range of external attacks.
There's so many things we can do. I'll rattle off one, two, or three of them, but we're living in a time where education and literacy is maybe the most important thing we can do on this planet. It's almost like, wow, smoking wasn't good for you, and it took a long time for us to realize that maybe you could get cancer from smoking and it was bad for you. Or pick any societal thing that occurred. It just took society a long time to make a change. And here we are in our digital universe with a lot of real threats and risks. Yet we kind of hide from it in a way that is letting this problem grow and grow and grow. And we need literacy, we need education. So I start with that was platforms like yours and Microhive. Like, how do we talk to people about the dangers that are here? We're not just here to scare you about what could happen. What does AI do and quantum computing do? And how do we affect space and electronic warfare now and real problems that are in the world brought on by computing? But what can we do defense wise to solve it? But the first thing we got to do is understand there's a problem here. And we're facing up to about 6 trillion a year of damages in the cyber domain. 6 trillion a year. This is 2 to 3 times bigger than the climate problems that are occurring, and 2 or 3 times bigger than the global corruption of drug cartels are causing. So what's the biggest existential threat in the world is our digital universe right now and the crime and espionage in it. So like just getting that literacy up, and then what can you do is we need better public-private partnership. So what's happened today is a lot of the governments have really isolated themselves and not created good, what I call government partnership with private industry. And we watched in Russia and Ukraine examples where private industry could really make a difference. And more of that coalition and partnering really could make a difference. And if we could come together as one, kind of uniting ourselves between government and society, we could stop this. But left many to many, which is kind of the model we have today, we almost need United Nations of cyber, and we need a peace treaty in cyber. And if we had a peace treaty in cyber with real ramifications behind it, almost like we have in some other kinetic parts of the world, we would make this problem go away. But like I said, you have to stop the motivation that the governments have today that they're using and create some sort of norm of behavior that the digital space has that would be similar to that of the physical space, where we have norms of behavior that we have to adhere to or largely should. And we got to get to that in the cyberspace. It's not a hard problem, but how do we motivate the world leaders to solve it?
I guess you're absolutely right. I mean, people, the way they treat the physical world or the kinetic world is very different to the digital world. It's almost like the digital world it's fine the way it is. We don't need to, transfer our norms and structures into the digital world. I don't know. It's just we just have this way of thinking that, as you rightly point out, it's not the right way of thinking.
Right. It's like, would you do harm to your neighbor physically? Would
Of
you
course
do
not.
harm to your neighbor digitally? Right? Like, you should think of it the same way. The norms of behavior should be the same. It just because you're on a computer doesn't mean you can hate your neighbor online. And like, there's so much of that that's happening. And now with our youth and our generations that are growing up with computing as part of their life from a very early stage, and you put the power of AI in their hands, it's like, hey, you just put a pack of cigarettes in a 4-year-old's hand every day. Like, this is what we've got to deal with now is addictions to devices, obsessive compulsive behavior because of those addictions, potential ramifications of mental health because of that, the dangers of it. And there's a lot of systemic issues. And when you look at Apple's and the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, they know how big this problem is, but yet they aren't doing stuff about it either. So if we could take our $1 trillion market cap companies on the planet and work with the government, that's all we need. And again, sounds simple. And I know it's kind of a hard statement, but man, that's what this society needs before it's too late.
And what about companies? What can they do? Because say my company, McAfee, what we do is, we have like Microsoft infrastructure that we use, and we have firewalls, all of those sorts of things. Which I imagine other companies do as well. But is that enough?
Typically, it's not. A motivated attacker, no matter what defenses you have, you'll be a victim, no matter what you can do. The largest corporations in the world, JP Morgan's, Jamie Dimon's been pretty open about spending $1 billion a year in security, $1 billion. And he still gets hacked. and he still gets breaches. And, you look at that and you just realize that the bad guys only have to be right once. The good guys have to be right all the time. So it's a very asymmetric theater and challenges. Now, there is a lot you can do to protect yourself for sure, because the higher the bar of security you can get, the harder it is for the average attacker to get to you. And that's kind of what you were alluding to is, literacy again starts first, because what's the biggest attack vector we have right now? It's called spear phishing, right? If I send you an email and it has an attachment to it, you open up the attachment and I put some sort of PowerShell into your computing environment that allows me to exfiltrate all your data. Well, you just fell victim pretty easily. Don't open that attachment, right? So you got to look at this in a way where just education of being a lot more cognizant of being online than you ever have before because of the dangers online, and protect yourself as a citizen to monitoring your credit, your debit, your accounts, doing things online that you really need to have, modified behaviors on, getting proper software on your computer. It doesn't cost a lot to get decent enough. CrowdStrike and products like that, NordVPN, they don't cost too much to get and really protect yourself, or a LifeLock type service to monitor your accounts. For a few $100s a year, you could raise the bar pretty high, even as a citizen. And as a corporation, not much more, especially a small business. So, but a lot of people don't do it. And because they don't do it, they become victims.
And and are invested in and are aware of some of the most cutting edge cybersecurity companies. I mean, what are some of these companies doing, that would surprise, our listeners?
Yeah. We love various focus areas. We have about 10 focus areas at NightDragon as an investment platform that we think are the biggest threats and risks in the area. And, just to rattle off a few of them is, the race to space is quite interesting. So security and safety in space, obviously securing AI and large language models and the development of generative AI, things like supply chain are really big threats and risks, and how to manage that supply chain, especially in the multipolar world we're living in. The blockchain brought on by crypto is an interesting problem and set. We think drones, robotics kind of areas are presenting some big threats. Electronic warfare is a big threat now, what's called EMS or electromagnetic spectrum capabilities that can disrupt or destroy computing environments. So there's a whole host of these problems, cyber in the cloud, data management, things like that. But what's been really, really cool is watching what capability is coming as a result of AI and quantum now. So, our ability to catch up to the bad guys and maybe equalize them is technology that's available today. So large language models now, they're becoming very prevalent, allows us to take massive data ingestions in. And I'll use an example of one of my companies for a second. It's called Interos.ai. The company has supply chain risk management. It imports hundreds of thousands of feeds a day from all over the world into a large language model, and then creates a relationship graph of all the businesses in the world. 440 million businesses, 11 billion relationships, all graphed using a large language model and monitored real time for threats and risks. So if there's a problem with the financials of a company somewhere in the world, or operations, or a cyber hack, or some issue, you can essentially monitor your supply chain, alter your supply chain, and have complete control over the world's kind of view of that. And AI gave us that capability. And because we now can do it with that, something happens in Ukraine with Russia or Israel, Hamas, or South China Sea, or the Black Sea, or the Red Sea, or somewhere, we can immediately create adjustments. And the tech is so good. So the power of the cloud, and AI put together now has a lot of really interesting upside to some of the problems that we've been talking about.
Now, you mentioned elections earlier in our conversation. Of course, there's one very sort of big one in our minds, the US elections. So, I mean, what are the types of cyber type attacks that are happening in the US elections that we've seen so far? We've had a bunch of primaries, and obviously we have the big election in November. What types of things should we expect to see?
Yeah, well, this problem goes back to 2016 when we discovered, this is all public, very large bot networks deployed across America. The Russian GRU had essentially deployed what was called the IRA, the Internet Rating Agency. It was a proxy of the Russian government. Again, you can look it up. Many individuals were arrested post the election, and they set up a bot farm. So this farm of bots was deployed into the battleground states of America, the ones that really made a difference in the elections. And we did not detect it. We didn't see that threat coming in 2016. And ultimately, it affected millions and millions of people. And the reason we know it affected millions and millions of people was because of sentiment and following and likes and things that occurred. We can't track it all the way to the polling station, but we could see the rhetoric the Russians were sending of anti-Hillary Clinton campaigns such that it had an outcome of the election. Fast forward to 2020, we started to see a lot more influence operations that were driving narratives into the psyche of America as well, from both China and Russia and Iran, that was confusing America as to, is there really a problem on the southern border? Is there immigration issues? Is there, really an economy problem? What are these real threats? So you look at one channel on television, it tells you one thing. You look at another channel, it tells you another. You look online, it tells you a third. And it gave the adversaries an opportunity to really affect things. So here we are in 2024. We have some of the strongest technology we've ever had for voting. I don't believe there's a country in the world that could match the technological capabilities we've now deployed to secure the elections, make sure the votes are counted, make sure, double, triple check with auditing. But what's the problem? What do people believe from what they read that wasn't true? And there lies the biggest issue we're facing in America and all over the world. What I mentioned was cognitive warfare, psychological warfare brought on by tools that can easily spread hate and malicious kinds of activities and deep fakes. And it's hard to determine what's real and what's not, confusing a lot of people to the reality
And
of
also
it.
politicians respond to that, and it becomes real in a funny way.
Yeah, funny as in scary. And
It's scary,
so,
yeah.
what are we trying to do is partner with the social media platforms, get ahead of this. There's a number of really interesting cyber companies that do what's called narrative intelligence now. So they actually can use large language models to sample across social media platform, looking for where the content was derived from. Was it a bot? Was it a human? What kind of content was it? Was it altered? Was it a deep fake? And begin to create a narrative relationship map to content. At least we're getting visibility to the problem. Now, what to do about it? How do we take down the bot farms? How do we stop humans from sending bad things? Not so easy. But if I could put something in your browser that essentially says, hey, what you're about to read is not real. Well, at least you know that it's not real. Or we believe it was altered, or we believe this or that. At least you get a little warning. And so that tech is almost here. But boy, does that need to happen faster, in my opinion. These are mostly small companies. AI has just come out a year ago, really. And we're racing against time to put defenses in place for information warfare that we're now watching around the world.
And presumably there's no way we can just say stop everything from Russia coming to our country. It's not as simple as that. You can't just say
I,
block
I wish it
Russia.
was. Yeah,
US.
because we can track the .ru domain all day, right? And we know, but what did the Russians do in 2016? They set up the operations in America. These people were arrested in Florida. Like, this was in the United States. So the immigration problem brought on people into the US. They set up operations. They're using domestic infrastructure in each of the countries to spread this. It's not an easy problem to solve. It isn't just block a country's, domain. It's much more difficult.
Mm. Now, unfortunately, we also have lots of wars going on around the world. When you look at, say, Russia, Ukraine, what are some of the things we've seen there in terms of the cyber side of things?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, war brings innovation. And this is what we watch. And I'll start with Russia, Ukraine for a minute, and we can talk about Israel and Hamas and, what's happening there. But, Russia, Ukraine, we watched a tremendous amount of cyber effort in the 9 months leading up to the actual invasion. And we were picking up a lot of like really strange supply chain attacks on like a oil depot or probing of utility infrastructure of certain nations around Ukraine. And we started to get a picture. Obviously, in hindsight, we could see how much the cyber element of it was done prior to the invasion. Certainly cutting off all communications, cutting fiber optic, blocking the airspace from what's called GPS jamming and other geospatial jamming techniques that were done. So there was a lot of electronic warfare, cyber warfare, all in the first 9 months pre-invasion and 3 to 6 months post-invasion. Then we watched this massive kinetic problem occur, physical warfare, obviously, as you all can see. But now we're watching again a new wave electromagnetic warfare that's getting interesting. Instead of flying drones every day and trying to blow up something, and then using a rocket to shoot down that drone, our ability to use electromagnetic cannons to shoot the drones down with pulsing. And this innovation is incredible. And the ability to create communications from space, leveraging private companies. So the world changed a lot in the speed of innovation and inertia of that during this war environment. And we really watched influence operations at a much bigger level. The battle wasn't just on the war on the front, it was the battle of the world's minds and how they associated Russia versus Ukraine. So that war is going on. You can see it in America. Should we give more, sort of arms and money to Ukraine, or should we not? Very powerful things came out of that. And one thing I'll say about Israel Hamas that was fascinating, October 7th, a horrible atrocity occurs, of course. But what a lot of people didn't see was over 130 bot farms were deployed on that same day. Pro-Palestinian bot farms were deployed on the same day. And what was interesting about it was a massive psychological effort was undergone at the same time as the attack occurred, trying to create a narrative that was pro-Palestinian. And the Israelis were caught off guard with that. And for whatever way you want to look at what's happened there, it was just interesting. Again, from a cyber point of view, there wasn't really anybody stealing anything. There wasn't really anybody disrupting anything from a cyber, but there was a lot of influencing of things that occurred as a part of that and is still going on almost every hour around the world.
And presumably these Israelis themselves are now doing cyber ops themselves. Presumably
Absolutely.
Israel's like very advanced in cyber technologies, I imagine.
But not seeing the massive deployment of it in the first days of it, kind of shaped the narrative early that could be countered. And so it's just an interesting problem. Again, you're going to see both cyber wars and attacks occurring traditionally on industrial infrastructure, but you're also going to see kinetic, you're going to see these cognitive warfares all at the same time. And this is part of our new world we're in.
Now, I did want to sort of pivot the conversation to something a bit more sort of happier, so to speak, which is around building companies. Now, you built a number of very successful companies. I mean, this is a hard question, but I mean, what's the secret of your success there? I mean, what do you attribute to what you've done or the teams around you have done that have enabled you to build successful companies?
Yeah, I wish I had like a 2-sentence answer for that. But what I learned about it is team, tech, and TAM. I always say the 3 T's matter, and I'll give you the 4 H's in a second. But team, tech, and TAM, when you have good technology in a big addressable market, a total addressable market, the last remaining piece is a strong team. Right? If you really get a good team together with tech and TAM, amazing things happen. So if you get a B- team or a C- team, you could have the world's greatest tech and the greatest TAM, and not so good things can happen. So leadership matters. A good team matters. Emotional attachment to the cause matters, because at the end of the day, it's the people that make a difference. And if you can really instill and inspire as part of leadership, like, you can make something great happen, even if the market or the products weren't as good. And that is, I think, the intangibles that are often missed by investors, by leaders, that if you see a great leader, a great CEO, a great board, a great management team, wow, they're worth investing into because again, they can make great things happen. So we look for the people side, the team side of a lot of it. And then when it comes to the leadership side, can they have the four H's? I call it four H's. Sounds silly, but honesty and humility, hard work and hunger, right? You put that combination together, it's a dynamite set because the more transparent you are, the more honest you are with your employees, the more you can keep humility as part of it. It's key. What corrupts leaders? Power, fame, fortune, right? So can you keep humility? Can you keep your honesty? Can you keep your hard work? Can you keep your hunger and your ambitions? You keep that together as a team and you put a powerful team together, great things happen. So that's what I see when I see great companies at work. One of them I'll tell you about for 30 seconds more is Delta Airlines. Why is a guy like me on the board of Delta Airlines? 14 years now, I've been on this board of Delta. I chair safety and security for them. So I have a role that I perform, but wow, is that leadership incredible. And in adversity of the pandemic and bankruptcies before this, this leader that's there is incredible. Ed Bastian's his name, and he just connects with people and emotionally attaches to people. And it takes a company that had a lot of crisis into now the highest performing airline, both pre-pandemic and post, because of the people. He was interviewed the other day and he said, name 5 words to describe your job. You know what he said immediately? Take care of your people is like the mantra to success, in my opinion. You take care of your employees, take care of your customers, you win.
And how have you found, you were previously CEO of lots of big companies and now you're kind of the other side. Now you're investing in multiple different companies. How have you found that transition? It's different. I mean, you're not just running one company. You're basically looking at a number of portfolio companies, and it's a different type of role.
It might be the hardest thing. I need a couch now for a psychology lesson. Well, it is hard. I mean, when you had control over the company or largely control as a CEO or chairman, like it was a different level than being an investor, being a board member, being just a chairman. So, you have to transition. You have to learn how to mentor, how to help. I made every mistake there was as a CEO. I had success too, but you got to share your experiences. You got to nurture. You got to mentor, and you gotta be behind the CEO, not in front of the CEO. And you learn that dynamic a lot as an investor. But what's important is, can you help that CEO? Can you create an operating platform that helps them? And, many of my investors have said when they've done references on NightDragon, we have the highest rating of references of all the fund managers they put money into, because we're a family and because we help people and because of the team and the people side of things. So it's a tough transition and one I'm still getting used to a little bit, but I do love it. And it's great to have such a mission in life. Securing the world for tomorrow is our storyline, but can we make a difference with companies we invest into? Can we make money for our shareholders, but also solve world problems? That makes me motivated.
That's fantastic. Now, I wanted to round off with a few sort of personal questions. One was we do have some younger people listening to this podcast as well. Many of those will be leaving college this year. What advice would you give to youngsters as they sort of enter the real world at a time like this?
Yeah, I have three kids myself, all in their 20s. So I watched 3 of them go from college to the workplace. I mean, it's a really important crossroad and opportunity. I always use the adage, measure twice, cut once. Really think about what motivates you. I talk about hierarchy of needs, fun, learning, and money a lot of times. And at different stages of my career, I really was about learning first, which was my early stage of my career. I did everything in my power early in my career to learn. Fun, money, secondary at the beginning, because I knew if I learned, I could make money and fun happen later. And then as I had a family, it became more money to raise my kids and my family. And later in life, it was more about fun and mission. And here's where I am with NightDragon. So, early on, just measuring, thinking about what's important to you, get a good mentor, take a job with a good mentor, somebody to take care of you, take care to find the boss that really loves you and respects you and wants to nurture you. That oftentimes is one of the bigger misses that happens as people transition too. Not easy to get, but if you can, magic can happen with that too.
And I like to read books, and so I'm always asking for book recommendations. What are some of the books that have influenced you, or perhaps some recent books that you've liked?
Oh, I read a ton of books too, and I love them. I read a lot of security books, so I apologize. People aren't going to know them. In fact, one of my favorite authors is former New York Times reporter Nicole Perlroth. She wrote a book called "How the World Will End," and talk about ominous, but pretty famous book. Talks about cyber. There was a movie, by the way, that Michelle Obama produced. I think it was called "Leave the World Behind." And it was what's her name? There's some famous actors and actresses in it. Talks about a cyber attack that was basically produced by Michelle Obama because she had visibility of things. But I do love motivational books. I just read Bruce Springsteen's autobiography. I grew up in New Jersey, Pennsylvania area, and big Bruce Springsteen fan, which is a great story of love and respect and growth and kind of cool. So, how about you? What book did you read?
There's loads of books that have influenced me over the years. There's a book I'm reading right now by a Buddhist monk called A Handbook for Hard Times. I'd really recommend it. It's very short, very clearly written, and it's really good for just a conventional, if you have a conventional job, but there's no jargon or anything. I read a really fun sci-fi book called The Red Scholar's Way, which was just a bit different. It's set in the future, and it's about a relationship between a pirate, a space pirate, and a spaceship, because a spaceship is sentient, has sentience. And there's another book I read recently called Fiction, again, because I have a bias to read nonfiction, so I force myself to read fiction just to kind of make sure I'm balanced. This book's called People Collide, and it's about a couple who are living in Eastern Europe, and then one day mysteriously they swap bodies. So the woman gets the husband's body and the husband gets the wife's body. And then it talks about the fallout from that, what happens to the relationship when the bodies swap. Really cleverly done. It's about how, you perceive things differently in the body that you have and
Oh, you're
such.
inspiring me for more books. I somehow fell into this app called Blinkist that
I know that.
basically
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Yeah,
lets
yeah.
me read it
Sort
in
of
10 minutes.
summarizes all the books.
Right.
Yeah.
So I probably need to go back and read books. My patience level for reading, book after book. My dad was here. My 87-year-old dad was here the other day, and here in Arizona, and he's like, "Yeah, here's my book reader. He read 137 books last year." Right.
Wow.
So I was like,
Great.
"Oh God, I want to be able to do that." Right.
Puts us to shame.
Yeah, it puts us to shame. I'm like, "You read 2 books a week? Like
Wow.
more than 2 books?" Like, yes. And he reads all the time, and it's fun to
Yeah.
talk to him because he's so knowledgeable.
That's fantastic. Now, I'd love to speak to you for longer, but I have to be respectful of your time. What's the best way for people to, connect with you, follow you, if they wanted to?
Yeah, we produce a lot of content at Night Dragon. So obviously nightdragon.com. We have a lot of things on there, but we also on LinkedIn, you can follow Night Dragon or you can follow me, Dave DeWalt on LinkedIn. So there's a lot there. I don't post things that aren't relevant to business. So I try to really put out content there that's informative to the threats and risks and trends that are happening. But we have a lot of followers on that platform as well. But I'm really thankful to do this show as well with you because a lot of the financial audience and a lot of what you've done hard work on creating, I'm really thankful for, and congrats to you as well and all the cool. Tell me about Macro Hive for a second. I need to hear the name again.
Yeah, McAfee. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, what we do is, we provide like very independent research analytics to decision makers in financial institutions around the world. So, if you're an asset manager, hedge fund, bank, we basically provide insights on how to manage financial risk, like views, like our bond yield's going to go up or down, and also we're introducing a lots of AI now as well in our work. So that's one of the things we're sort of doing. And the thing with AI is there's a lot of stuff that's you can't trust and you can trust. So we're being very careful about how we're employing AI. So for us, trust is the most important thing, that we're going to do everything very, very sort of trustworthy way. So for example, we're building our own large language model, which we're going to use OpenAI and such as a foundation, but we're adding kind of an additional memory bank, which is sources we trust, so that if you ask it a question, it will only go to trusted sources. And we've added some additional scaffolding to it to make sure that it gives you, the kind of a correct answer to your question. So that's kind of in dev at the moment. We've got it in beta sort of mode.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So
And
it's pretty cool stuff.
that keeps the hallucinations and the poisoning.
Exactly.
and-
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we kind of minimize that as much as possible because we've introduced certain reasoning algorithms in there as well. So as to kind of, to sort of minimize the hallucinations. But it also helps if the text upon which you're basing the context on is trusted to start with. It minimizes the hallucinations a lot in any case.
Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations. Love the
Yeah.
innovation. We need more of you doing that. That's for sure. And when's it come out? What's the timing?
So the timing for this model, it will come out after the summer, so September. So we've got kind of a beta mode that we're playing around with, and then by the end of September, we should be able to sort of release that to clients and to the world. So it should be.
I have to flip it around and have you on my show, and then we
more than happy to. Yeah, I'm going to tell you all about our experiences doing that. So, and then we can, I could happy to talk to you about market risk, economic risk that people are looking at, and so on. So,
yeah. By the way, in one of the bigger areas of security, cyber is in the world of economic intelligence. So kind of hitting on some of that is how do we understand the economy and the intelligence, and AI has given us a very powerful capability, but now adversaries are looking for ways to disrupt it based on the economic intelligence. So there's good guys and bad guys on that equation too. So
yeah.
Profit from it, from crime.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's fantastic. Well, thanks
Great
again,
for
David.
having me.
It's fantastic having you on, and I'd love to come on your show, and I'll let's stay in touch, and we'll and I do follow all of your posts. It really truly is insightful.
Thank you. Great to get to know you, and congrats on your show and your product, and hope to see you around next time I'm in London as well.
Great,
thank you.
Thanks for listening to the episode. Please subscribe to the podcast show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating, a nice comment, and let other people know about the show. We'd be super grateful. Finally, sign up for our free newsletter at macrohive.com/free. That's macrohive.com/free. We'll be back soon, so tune in then.